Billionaire family humiliated a black woman at party minutes later. She canceled their $30B legacy. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Oh my God, who the hell let her in here? The words cracked through the ballroom, like crystals shattering on marble. Every fork froze midair. Every conversation died in half a laugh. The woman in the crimson gown, golden hair, diamonds coiled around her neck like trophies was laughing as she pointed. Her laughter wasn't joy. It was sport. A blood sport played under chandeliers worth more than most homes. Across from her stood a woman in white, poised, still, skin gleaming against the flood of gold light. No label shouted her worth. No entourage hovered near. Just composure, calm as stone. Around them, the orchestra faltered. The violins didn't know how to play through prejudice. Cameras lifted discreetly, phones rising like predators drawn to scent. The crowd turned in unison, a ballet of curiosity and cruelty. Maybe she wandered in from the service entrance, the heiress added sweetly, her smile cutting sharper than glass. The men beside her chuckled, obedient and cowardly. Relax, everyone. Mistakes happen. A waiter nearby hesitated, eyes darting between the women. The music gasped, then tried to pretend nothing had happened. But everyone knew it had. The woman in white, her name, unknown to them, didn't flinch. She looked at the heiress the way a storm studies a city, measuring its foundations. A small drop of champagne slid down the rim of her untouched glass, landing on the marble with a soft patter that somehow sounded louder than the laughter had been. Don't just stand there, the older man beside the heiress barked at security. Escort this confusion out of here before she embarrasses the hosts. The guard hesitated, that fraction of hesitation only seen when power feels misaligned. The heiress's eyes flashed. Do it. But before he could move, the woman in white finally spoke. Her tone was gentle, each word perfectly pronounced, the kind that belonged to someone who had never once raised her voice to be heard. I'm afraid, she said quietly, you're the ones making the mistake. The silence that followed was total. Even the chandeliers seemed to hum. Her companion, tall, suited in midnight blue, took a half step closer, not to shield her, but to witness. His gaze swept the room like a verdict waiting to be read. And still, she didn't move. The heiress's laugh returned, nervous now, thinner. Oh, honey, she sneered, people like you don't get to correct people like us. A murmur rippled through the tables, fascination and discomfort intertwining. The woman in white lowered her gaze for a heartbeat, almost as if in prayer. Then she looked up, and every breath in the room seemed to forget itself. Something invisible had shifted. The temperature, the sound, the certainty. It was the moment before lightning, silent, electric, inevitable. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. The heiress turned away, muttering to her friends, but the spell of arrogance had cracked. From the corner of the room, someone whispered, "She looks familiar." Another voice replied, "Don't be ridiculous, she's nobody." But the truth, the devastating billion-dollar truth, was already on its way. The woman in white raised her glass, not to toast, not to drink, but to mark the moment. Because in less than 10 minutes, every person laughing in that room would remember her name and wish they hadn't. At first, no one moved. The laughter had died, but its echo still clung to the chandeliers like smoke after fireworks. Then something invisible began to slide through the room, a drop in temperature so slight it might have been imagination. Yet everyone felt it. The woman in white hadn't raised her voice, hadn't taken a step, but somehow she had shifted gravity. Conversations restarted in half sentences, brittle and nervous. A violinist missed a note, the sound trembling into silence. Across the marble floor, the heiress in red tried to recover her rhythm. She lifted her glass, pretending the humiliation she'd served hadn't just curdled in her hands. "Anyway," she said too brightly, "shall we toast to success?" No one followed. The woman in white, Ariana Cole, stood perfectly still. Her gaze moved slowly around the table, pausing on each face long enough for discomfort to bloom. Her calm was unbearable. It exposed how desperate the others were to appear unbothered. Her companion in the navy tuxedo leaned close. "You don't have to stay," he murmured. "I do," she answered, eyes fixed on the crowd. "They need to see what silence looks like when it refuses to bow." The words were quiet, but they landed with the weight of prophecy. Across the hall, waiters exchanged uneasy glances. One accidentally brushed a silver tray. The soft chime rang out like a warning bell. Even the chandeliers seemed to flicker, caught between warmth and guilt. Ariana lifted her napkin, blotting a small stain from her glass, an action so ordinary it became theatrical. Every motion deliberate, every pause timed. The red of the wine against her white gown looked almost painted on, dignity marked but not broken. The heiress laughed again, brittle now. "Don't take it personally," she said, voice sugar-coated in panic. "It's just, well, some people don't know the rules." Ariana tilted her head, curiosity sharpening into something colder. "Rules," she repeated softly. "Or excuses." No one breathed. For a second, the orchestra dared a note. The piano keys hesitated under trembling hands, then quiet again. Somewhere near the bar, a man whispered, "Who is she?" A woman replied, "Someone important enough not to flinch." Ariana turned toward the grand mirror behind the head table. In its reflection, she could see everything. The trembling waiter, the guests frozen in expensive discomfort, the heiress forcing another laugh. It was all theater, and she had just rewritten the script. Inside, her pulse was steady. Years of boardrooms, deals, and hidden condescension had trained her to weaponize stillness. "Control isn't volume," her grandmother used to say. "It's temperature." The thought made her almost smile. She set her glass down, the click of crystal precise as punctuation. "You're right," she said softly. "Not to anyone and to everyone at once. This is about success." "Everyone." The heiress relaxed too soon. "Exactly," she said, relief in her voice. Ariana continued, "And success always reveals character." The words hung in the air like incense, slow, fragrant, undeniable. Her phone buzzed once in her clutch. A single vibration. No one noticed but her. That was the sound of inevitability beginning. Outside the tall windows, snow started to fall. Gentle, soundless, uninvited. The kind of quiet that comes before consequence. Inside, beneath chandeliers trembling with light, the room didn't yet know it was already part of a legend. And Ariana Cole, calm and immaculate, simply waited for the storm she had already summoned. To understand why Ariana Cole stood so calmly beneath that chandelier, you have to know the story the world never saw. For years, her name had been whispered in boardrooms, never printed in magazines. She was the phantom shareholder who could move markets with a single call, the founder and CEO of Cole Global Capital, a private conglomerate valued at over $120 billion. But power, real power, never needed applause. It preferred silence. Ariana had built that empire the way storms build pressure, invisible, disciplined, inevitable. 20 years earlier, she was a scholarship student with a part-time job and a $100 dream to design financial systems that didn't crush the people who needed them most. When the banks laughed, she listened. When investors refused her meetings, she built her own fund. Now, the very institutions that once locked her out carried her signature on their balance sheets. Yet she never forgot what exclusion felt like, the sting of being mistaken for staff in buildings she owned. That memory was a tattoo beneath her calm. It wasn't bitterness, it was blueprint. And tonight, inside the ballroom of the Wyndham family old money wrapped in arrogance, that blueprint was about to redraw itself. The Wyndhams were a dynasty in decline. Real estate, steel, a reputation older than compassion. Their empire had been eroding for a decade, but they hid the cracks beneath champagne and charity. The gala was supposed to announce their salvation, a $30 billion partnership with Cole Global Capital. The deal would wipe out their debts, restore their legacy, and keep their crest shining above the city skyline. Only one signature was missing, hers, and the irony glittered sharper than the diamonds around Eleanor Wyndham's throat, the woman who had just called Ariana a mistake. No one in that ballroom knew the truth. They thought the woman in white was a guest of a guest, maybe a misplaced executive assistant. None of them imagined she owned the holding company that financed their entire empire. Ariana had arrived quietly, unannounced, without title or entourage. She wanted to see the people she was about to save who they were when they thought she was nothing. Now she knew. Across the table, Eleanor's husband, Richard Wyndham, was laughing too loudly at something that wasn't funny. Their son scrolled his phone, oblivious to his family's unraveling. Their daughter, the one in the crimson gown, sipped champagne like defiance in liquid form. They had no idea that their dynasty stood on a foundation she could dissolve with one email. Ariana's hand brushed her phone, still tucked inside her clutch. The vibration from earlier echoed like a heartbeat. Protocol Indigo was waiting a command designed for moments exactly like this. Her assistant's message flashed briefly on the locked screen. All clear. One word from you. She didn't smile. She didn't move. Because justice, when it's real, doesn't arrive with noise. It waits patient, composed until the stage is ready. Around her, the laughter resumed, brittle as glass. The heiress whispered another careless joke, the kind that travels quickly and ages badly. Ariana's reflection in the mirror looked back at her calm, controlled, unrecognizable from the girl who once begged for a seat at the table. Now she built the tables. And soon, she'd decide who still deserved a chair. The orchestra had recovered, at least on the surface. Music floated again through the ballroom, fragile as spun glass, pretending the air hadn't changed. Guests resumed their chatter, though no one's laughter reached their eyes. Only Ariana Cole seemed entirely still, a fixed point while the world rearranged itself around her. At the head table, Eleanor Wyndham raised her flute. "A toast," she announced, her smile lacquered and hollow. "To old alliances and new beginnings." Crystal clinked, dutiful and empty. Ariana's glass remained on the table. Her phone vibrated once, soft against the silk of her clutch. A name glowed for less than a second. Rachel Nguyen, Chief Counsel. Ariana slipped the device open beneath the tablecloth, her movements slow, deliberate. On the screen, Rachel. "Board confirmed. Protocol Indigo ready. Do you wish to proceed?" Ariana's thumb hovered above the single-word reply. She looked up. Eleanor was still speaking, painting the air with champagne arrogance. "Partnership," she said grandly, "is about knowing one's place and keeping it." A few nervous chuckles answered. Across the hall, the massive LED screen displayed the Wyndham Group crest. The logo shimmered beneath the chandeliers, like a relic from a dying empire. Ariana watched it, her expression unreadable, the reflection of gold light dancing across her eyes. In her memory flickered another room, another humiliation a decade earlier, when a banker had refused her loan application and suggested she try a smaller dream. She'd walked out of that office, built her empire, and later bought the very bank that dismissed her. Now she was sitting in a ballroom financed by that same institution. History, she thought, doesn't repeat. It reconciles. She typed a single word. Proceed. Send. The message left her phone like the pull of a trigger. No one saw it, but every consequence already knew its cue. Somewhere downtown, lights blinked on inside the Cole Global headquarters. Servers whirred to life. Encrypted orders cascaded through layers of authorization. Contracts flagged, terminated. Accounts locked. The $30 billion transaction frozen. At the trading desk, a broker frowned at a red notification. Transfer canceled by primary authority. He reread it twice, unsure if it was an error. Inside the ballroom, Ariana raised her glass at last. "To clarity," she said softly. Her voice didn't rise above the music, yet every ear caught it. Eleanor blinked, uncertain whether she'd just been honored or condemned. Then her husband's phone buzzed. One buzz. Two. Three. His smile faltered. "Excuse me," he murmured, stepping away. Ariana watched him go, the faintest arch of her brow the only sign of recognition. Beside her, the man in the navy tuxedo whispered, "It's done?" She answered without looking at him. "It began the moment they decided my worth. This Seedham is Livel. Is there here?" At the far end of the room, Richard Wyndham reappeared, color draining from his face. He whispered urgently to his wife. She froze. The orchestra kept playing, oblivious to the collapse quietly unfolding between beats. Across the hall, a waiter poured champagne that no one would drink. Ariana placed her phone beside her plate screen dark. Action complete. She didn't need to see the aftershocks to know they were already rewriting balance sheets and headlines. Power, she thought, never yells. It deletes. And in that glittering room of borrowed pride, silence once again became her language and her justice. The first tremor began 3 miles away in a tower of glass and steel that carried the Wyndham crest. Inside, a junior analyst was staring at his monitor when every figure on his screen turned red. "System glitch?" he muttered. But then came the email. "Urgent. Contract termination. Notice Cole Global Capital." Within seconds, executives were shouting across floors, phones lighting like wildfire. At headquarters, the CFO's call went straight to voicemail. The chairman's line rang and rang, unanswered. And all the while, in that glittering ballroom, the orchestra kept playing. No one had yet realized that the music was now performing for a ghost. Richard Wyndham's phone wouldn't stop vibrating. He stepped into the hallway, colorless beneath the golden sconces. "What do you mean canceled?" he hissed into the receiver. On the other end, his legal counsel sounded terrified. "Sir, the wire transfer's been recalled. They revoked digital access. Every clause is locked under arbitration protocol." "That's impossible." "Aye, sir. Cole Global invoked ownership clauses we didn't know existed." In fastrated byword, Richard's voice cracked into a whisper. "Oh my God." He turned toward the ballroom doors. Through the glass, he could still see Ariana Cole serene, sipping water now, as if nothing in the world could touch her. Inside, Eleanor Wyndham's laughter was unraveling. Her daughter leaned in. "Mother, what's happening?" "Dad looks..." "Quiet," Eleanor snapped, the edges of panic slicing her voice. "Just smile." But then the room began to sense it, the shift. Phones buzzing across tables, whispered gasps. A man near the bar read an alert aloud before he could stop himself. "Breaking. Cole Global withdraws from Wyndham merger, effective immediately." The sound spread faster than rumor. Eleanor froze. The heiress beside her turned pale. The violinist stumbled mid-bar, unsure whether to continue playing. At the center of it all, Ariana Cole sat perfectly still, a portrait of unshaken control. She glanced once at her reflection in the wineglass, the chaos behind her, the calm before her. Her companion leaned in. "You did this?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Across the city, trading floors flickered with confusion. Wyndham stock began to nosedive in real time. Screens flashed red. -22%, -35%, -47%. News tickers blinked. $30B deal collapse sparks panic. Reporters scrambled for statements that didn't exist. Rachel Newen, watching from Cole Global's control room, adjusted her headset. "Phase 2 confirmed," she said. "Press embargo lifts in 5. "Do you want a statement, Miss Cole?" her communications director asked over the secure line. Ariana's voice came through the speaker, calm, level, surgical. "No statement. Let the silence explain itself. It is not related." Back at the ballroom, Richard staggered to his wife's side. "It's over," he said quietly. "Completely." Eleanor shook her head, refusing to believe it. "She can't. She wouldn't. She already did." Guests began to retreat, murmuring apologies that weren't really apologies. Photographers caught the moment the woman in red, her diamond smile cracking under the lights. Ariana rose from her chair, unhurried. Every motion elegant, final. She placed her napkin on the table as if signing an invisible decree. Then she said the only words that mattered. "This is what accountability looks like in real time." The cameras caught them, all. The heiress frozen mid-breath. Her father collapsed into silence, the empire dissolving under chandeliers that no longer glittered with pride but with consequence. And as Ariana Cole walked out of that ballroom, the orchestra fell silent, not because the music had end by dawn. The world had a new headline. Billionaire family loses $30B deal after humiliating gala incident. The footage came from a dozen angles, shaky phones, paparazzi lenses, live stream fragments stitched together into a single viral storm. The internet devoured every second. The clip started with laughter, then the insult, then the stillness, and finally, Ariana Cole's unbothered silence the moment that ended an empire. Within hours, hashtags flooded every feed. Number Cole legacy. Number dignity as power. Number when silence speaks. Commentators called it the quietest revolution ever caught on camera. Others called it the death of old money arrogance. Even news anchors struggled to sound neutral. One on CNBC said it plainly, "What we're witnessing isn't a financial event, it's a moral correction." Across the city, the Wyndham headquarters looked different in daylight, reporters crowding the entrance, drones hovering above the glass facade. Richard Wyndham's statement to the press lasted 38 seconds. He blamed a misunderstanding. He didn't mention the insult. He didn't say her name. But the internet already had. Clips of Ariana walking out of the ballroom had been looped a million times. The tilt of her chin, the stillness in her stride, the napkin folded with surgical precision. Memes turned that gesture into a symbol. Folded napkin, folded empire. One caption read. Financial papers tried to analyze it, to rationalize it as if dignity could be quantified in percentages. But the public didn't need analysis. They understood exactly what had happened. Justice, for once, had perfect lighting. At Cole Global's tower, Rachel Nguyen stood beside Ariana as screens across the trading floor broadcast the collapse. Trending worldwide, Rachel said quietly. Ariana only nodded. Should we issue a response? Ariana sipped her coffee. We already did. Rachel smiled faintly. Without saying a word, in a corner of the room, a young intern whispered, she didn't just cancel a deal, she rewrote the definition of partnership. Meanwhile, the Wyndhams were imploding. Eleanor Wyndham's charity board suspended her position, pending review. Their daughter's social accounts vanished overnight. Their stock portfolio was under investigation for insider trading, not because Ariana exposed them, but because the collapse dragged their secrets into daylight. Every door that once opened for them now waited politely locked. At a downtown cafe, two women scrolled through the headline on a tablet. Can you imagine? One said. The other smiled. I can. Finally. That night, a journalist asked Ariana for comment outside her building. Microphones, flashes, chaos. She paused long enough to answer a single question. Miss Cole? Was this revenge? Her eyes lifted to the skyline, the same skyline once owned by the family who mocked her. No, she said quietly. This was accountability, the currency of our time. Then she walked away, leaving the microphones catching nothing but the city's wind. Online, the final image of her that day wasn't from a red carpet or a press conference. It was a still frame Ariana standing at a window, phone in hand, dawn light spilling over her white gown. The caption beneath it read, Power doesn't shout, it corrects. It neither wanos, the wit, ed. But because the room itself had finally learned who it was playing for. For weeks, the Wyndham name lived where power goes to die. In the headlines, in whispers, in the boardrooms of people suddenly pretending they had never known them. The family's estate, once a symbol of permanence, was now an artifact. Marble halls turned quiet. Calls went unanswered. The staff left one by one, their paychecks frozen under legal review. The charity boards that used to chase Eleanor Wyndham's signature quietly postponed her events. She still dressed for breakfast, still wore pearls, still instructed the servants who were no longer there. Every morning she'd unfold the paper, hoping for a headline that might rewrite the past. But every morning, it was the same. Wyndham Empire collapses amid scandal. At first, Eleanor blamed Ariana Cole. Then she blamed her husband. Eventually, the mirrors were all that was left, and they refused to agree with her either. Richard Wyndham spent his days on the phone with creditors who no longer took his calls. It was one mistake, he kept saying, a misunderstanding. But the markets don't believe in misunderstandings, only math. His last remaining board seat was revoked after a leaked memo revealed that he'd concealed debt from his investors. His attorney advised him to lay low, a euphemism for invisibility. Old money never vanishes gracefully. It fades under fluorescent lights. Their daughter, Victoria, the woman in the crimson gown, tried to pivot. She posted an apology video. The internet responded with 4 million comments and 2 billion views. The apology lasted 52 seconds before she broke down crying. Someone turned the video into a remix. The world moved on without her. Her sponsors cut ties within the hour. Her fiancé returned the ring on live television, a gesture she later described as the most expensive lesson I've ever learned. For the first time in her life, she couldn't buy silence. One evening, she went to a charity dinner, not as a guest, but as a volunteer. She poured wine, arranged place cards, and smiled through whispers that trailed her name like perfume. When one woman leaned over and said softly, "You must miss the view from the top," Victoria's answer surprised them both. "Not really," she said. "The air's cleaner down here." It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was human. Meanwhile, Ariana Cole refused every interview about the Wyndhams. When asked, she only said, "Some lessons shouldn't be retold. They should be remembered." Still, she kept track of them in quiet ways. Through corporate filings, through the steady sale of their assets, through the headlines that spoke in numbers instead of names. It wasn't vengeance. It was arithmetic. Months later, a letter arrived at Cole Global's office. Handwritten, heavy paper. No signature, just initials VW. "You were right," it said. "I was cruel because I thought cruelty proved power. It didn't. It proved fear. I hope you use what we lost better than we ever used what we had." Ariana read it once, folded it carefully, and placed it in a file marked unreturned. Then she went back to work. In Chicago's winter light, the Wyndham Mansion finally went up for sale. Reporters gathered at the gates as trucks rolled out furniture wrapped in white sheets, paintings crated like ghosts being moved from one past to another. No one bought the house for months. The asking price dropped quietly, then again, until it became a rumor more than a property. And yet inside that emptiness, a single thing remained carved into the marble of the entryway, a remnant of the family crest. "Fortune favors the bold." The words had once meant ambition. Now they read like irony. On the night the sale finally closed, Ariana stood by her window, watching snow fall over the city again. Rachel entered, tablet in hand. "It's done," she said. "Wyndham Estate sold. The buyer was anonymous." Ariana didn't look away from the glass. "Not anonymous," she said softly. "Intentional." Rachel smiled. "You?" Ariana's reflection in the window was faint, almost ghostly. "No," she said. "The foundation." Rachel nodded slowly. "The Grace Initiative?" "Yes. It'll become a leadership academy. For women who've been told they don't belong in rooms like that one." "And Wanaming Mariam," Rachel exhaled, half disbelief, half awe. "You turned their empire into a classroom." Ariana's gaze didn't shift. Empires crumble. Lessons last. The next morning, as sunlight spilled across the new plaque outside the gates, the words were simple and quiet. "The Grace Leadership Academy, founded on the belief that dignity builds legacies." Passers-by didn't know the story behind the name. They didn't need to. But for those who had witnessed the gala, the headline, the silence, they understood. Power had spoken once, arrogantly. Now it whispered through every open door Ariana Cole built in its place. The city didn't know what day the noise stopped. Maybe it was when the headlines faded. Maybe it was the morning people passed the new academy without remembering the name it used to bear. But in that quiet, something larger remained, not the scandal, not the money, not the loss. The lesson. At sunrise, the Grace Leadership Academy glowed like a promise reborn. Its marble steps, once polished for the feet of the privileged, now carried students in bright scarves and worn sneakers. Young women from every corner of the world. Lagos, Detroit, Manila, Kingston, walking through doors that had once been locked to them. Inside, the atrium was filled with light. Where the Wyndham crest had once hung, there was now a simple inscription carved into the stone. "For those who were told no, build your own yes." Every morning, Ariana walked through that hall without ceremony. She wasn't there for recognition. She came to listen to the hum of possibility that echoed where arrogance once lived. Her schedule was still full. Board meetings, global investments, projects spanning continents, but this place grounded her. It reminded her why silence, when wielded with purpose, could become the loudest language in the world. One afternoon, she found a girl sitting alone on the stairs, no older than 19. Notebook on her knees, eyes filled with that familiar fire between fear and ambition. Ariana sat beside her. "First week?" she asked. The girl nodded. "They said I don't look like someone who belongs in finance." Ariana smiled softly. "Good. That means you'll rewrite it." The girl looked up, hesitant. "Is it true? What people say? That you ruined a family?" Ariana's gaze drifted to the sunlight spilling through the windows. "I didn't ruin them," she said. "They built something fragile and called it power. I just stopped holding it up." The girl nodded slowly, understanding more than she realized. Ariana added, "Never mistake silence for surrender. Sometimes it's strategy. The other would have on that ability." The words landed the way her grandmothers once had: simple, eternal. Later that evening, Ariana returned to her penthouse overlooking the city. The skyline glittered, indifferent and alive. Rachel was already there, reviewing reports. Enrollment exceeded projections, she said, and the Grace Fund's first portfolio of startups all women led. Ariana poured 2 glasses of wine. Then let's toast to the future. Rachel raised an eyebrow. You, toasting? That's rare. Ariana smiled faintly. Tonight's not about endings. It's about continuity. They clinked glasses. Outside, the wind brushed against the glass windows, soft, persistent, like history exhaling. At midnight, Ariana stood alone on her balcony. Far below, the city pulsed with traffic and life, billions of stories unfolding, none of them aware of hers. And that was fine. She hadn't done it to be remembered. She had done it so others could begin. Her thoughts wandered to her grandmother, the woman who scrubbed marble floors for families that once looked down on her. She would have liked this view, Ariana thought. Not for the height, but for the justice in it. The full circle kind earned quietly, not claimed loudly. She whispered into the night, almost prayer-like. We don't need to own every room. We just need to build better ones. The wind carried the words away, scattering them like seeds. Weeks later, the academy hosted its first graduation. Ariana stood at the back, watching rows of young women in white blazers, the color of renewal walking across a stage bathed in gold light. Each one held a diploma embossed with the emblem of the Grace Initiative. Each one, a ripple of what had started with silence. When the final applause faded, the students turned toward her, clapping as one. Ariana shook her head gently, smiling. This isn't about me, she said. It's about what happens next. They cheered anyway. That night, alone in her office, she opened the old file labeled Unreturned. Inside was the letter from Victoria Wyndham, folded, creased, forgiven. Ariana reread the line, I hope you use what we lost better than we ever used what we had. She set it down beside a new document, the deed confirming the final transfer of the Wyndham estate to the Grace Initiative. Signed, sealed, done. History corrected. Outside, dawn began again, soft, unhurried. The city lights dimmed as the first rays touched the rooftops, gilding everything they met. And in that fleeting golden hour, it was impossible to tell where one legacy ended and another began. A narrator's voice, calm, deliberate, rose like the closing credits of a film that refuses to fade. They mocked her because they thought silence meant weakness. They learned that silence, in the right hands, can move the world. Dignity doesn't need applause, it just needs time. And time, it seems, always takes her side,